He is alone on a hill, probably starving, frightened. He has already asked for death to come once, asked to join his brothers who were put to death by the evil queen, asked to be put out of his own misery. Exhausted. Done. There is so much noise in the story of Elijah, a story that is filled with conflict and shouting and death, that it's hard to see this passage for what it really is. Though Elijah has not chosen for this to be. This is a vision quest, like the kind Native Americans took and still take to find their connection to God, a connection that usually brought them into contact with their spirit animal, like the kind Aboriginal Australians took and still take, like the kind Jesus took right after he was baptized. Elijah, like Jesus, seems driven to this. He's been running almost forever through the wilderness on the strength of one meal, and the power of that meal has started to fade, and so has he. And the voice of God comes to him. What are you doing here, Elijah? And Elijah gives a long answer, but it translates down to a pretty polite, you know darn well, running. And God says, come out, for I am about to pass by. And that's a big deal. There's a lot of noise in the story of Elijah, and there had been a lot of noise in his life. But in this place, God can push past the noise and even use noise as a vehicle with which to teach Elijah. The windstorm came, but God was not in the wind. The earthquake came, but God was not in the earthquake. The fire, God was not even in the fire. And then a still, small voice. What are you doing here, Elijah? A central theme of the vision quest, no matter what culture it's coming out of, is that one must get out of one's own way. That our separation from God, if you will, is really a matter of self-isolation. It's a matter of the walls that we put up between ourselves, others, and God. And because of this self-created noise that blocks us from hearing God, a quest involves getting all that silenced to the point of using isolation, fasting, sleep deprivation as a way to move us beyond the noise. If you want to look at it this way, the idea is to take you to the brink, to take the fight out of you, to get you to give up, so that the still small voice can be heard. What are you doing here, Elijah? The events of Elijah's life are grandiose. He and his eventual replacement, Elisha, are really the Old Testament prophets from the Marvel Comics tradition. They would have no trouble throwing down with Thor. Heck, in 2 Kings chapter 6, Elisha makes an iron axe head float. Elijah in this story is running because of his rather loud participation in the killing of the evil prophets of the queen. And now, bound by his own fear, his anger, his feeling of hopelessness, and probably his feelings of betrayal, he has to be worn down to get to the truth of God. Worn down to hear that still small voice. Worn down to get past the noise. We are a people of noise. We are surrounded by it. We carry it around in our pockets. We transmit it through multiple rooms of our homes, through screens. We jam it in our ears with earbuds and ever-improving, ever more expensive headphones. We are a people of noise, and the younger we are, the more apt we are to never be left alone with our own thoughts. And it hurts us. It hurts us on a daily basis when we feel uncentered, nervous, unsure. And it hurts us because there comes a time in everyone's life when you are left alone with your thoughts. And a crisis is not the first time you want to land there. Life is so much better if we can start to listen for the still small voice before a crisis comes. I have to be honest, I wondered about using this text on All Saints' Day. The connection did not exactly jump out at me. But as I struggled with it, and struggled as I always do with this day, the connection started to become clear. When we can get past the noise, when we connect to God, we ground ourselves in eternity. We realize our connection to the Creator and all things. And in a world where we are all eventually taken from each other, where death can leave us broken even when, and sometimes especially when, we are not the one taken, we need that connection. Because that connection grounds us and strengthens us and reminds us there is a reality beyond this life. We need to stop the noise and listen for the still, small voice, because that voice will bring us assurance and restore our joy in living. So, what to do? Pray. Meditate. Your smartphone can actually become a prayer friend. Download a meditation app or a spoken prayer app. Read Scripture. Join a good Bible study. Join one of our classes. Read in general. Exercise. Get away from meaningless screen time. Sit outside in one place for 30 minutes a day, or walk. Walk, and as you walk, note the beautiful, marvelous things that you see. Worship. Come in here. Turn off the phone. Let your mind float with the songs and the prayers, or just be as all of that happens around you. Remember something you used to do as a kid that you loved, and do it again. Brush the dog. Take the time to cook. Really, really cook something. Do a craft. Realize the noise has to slow down and stop so that the silence can become your friend. You remember that campaign from a while back? Breathe. Turn off the phone unless you're meditating with it, and just be where you are so the noise will stop. When we are close to death, something kind of incredible happens. That BS meter that every one of us is born with, you know, that thing inside that points it out, measures it, calculates the odor, it gets really sensitive. And it usually points us to what is really important. And so much of what we concern ourselves with isn't. When we stop the noise, we start to see that. Work to stop the noise. Listen for the still, small voice. God is there for you. And in that presence, you will find the joy of living, even when crisis tears out your heart.